Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Writer's Routine, where this week we're chatting to Caroline Corcoran about her new novel, Tiny Daggers. Caroline is a Sunday Times bestseller, sold all around the world, and we discuss the trickiness of being in that situation, amazing though it is, but still having to think through 3 books at the same time. Also, why she's learned to accept slower days and change the mindset with a slightly different word count.
There will be the good days, and there will also be our attention spans in 2025. I mean, I sat down to write this morning and I spent an hour on Instagram doing work. It's work stuff. I did an event last night. I was posting about it. I'm on Amazon First Reads this weekend, has gone live. So there was loads of stuff I needed to post about and fuel. But it still swallowed up a chunk of the day, and you then have that gnawing, oh, I'm behind. So I think giving yourself that space to go, it's okay, and you don't have to have the feeling of failure while still staying on track, which it is important to do. It really works for me, the weekly word count.
And we run through how much plotting time she likes to have.
I'm not very good at planning. And I'm not very good at being patient in terms of, I like to get going on the writing. I like to get cracking. I get a bit too, I get a little bit impatient with the planning. And like I say, I often kind of then have to go back and plan a bit more and re-enter it. But in terms of how long, it can just be so varied, and it just depends on the book. There's such different beasts, I find. Like, some just really begin to write themselves. Some need a lot of time to be percolating. It's probably about 5 or 6 months writing time, and a couple of months planning, sort of in a full-on way.
It's all on the way with Caroline Corcoran in this week's Writer's Routine. Yes, welcome along to the show. My name's Dan Simpson. This is Writer's Routine, where we take a look inside an author's working day. And this week we're with Caroline Corcoran. Her debut, Through the Wall, came out in 2019, and she's been a Sunday Times bestseller ever since, translated into so many languages. Followed it up with The Baby Group and 5 Days Missing and What Happened on Floor 34. I love chatting to an author who's always wanted to be a published writer of fiction, and when it happens, they make the most of it. They jump on that runaway train, and they're going wherever it's heading, and they're working and publishing to keep up with it. Really enjoy authors who have that mindset and embrace it, and Caroline's done exactly that. Used to write and edit for magazines, newspapers, websites, apps, working for The Guardian, The Telegraph, Marie Claire, The Mirror, and loads more. And we talk about what she learned from that busy writing career that she's now taken into her life as an author, and how it's helped her just get on with the words every day. You can hear about the tropes that she embraces in her genre, why journalism has helped her structure her stories too. Her newest one is called Tiny Daggers. It's all about the expat Holly Jones, who's built the perfect life for herself in Miami. She's living it up, she's loving it, when suddenly she runs into a ghost from her old life in London, another Holly, and is suddenly haunted by the memories of what she left behind. Now, this chat was recorded right at the start of summer, so this book is well and truly out. You can get a copy on the Writer's Routine page over at bookshop.org. If you're going to do that, use the link in the episode notes or wherever you're listening. And we'll dive into it then with Caroline Corcoran, running through what she sees around her in the place where she sits down to write.
Today is a good day because my children haven't deposited various toys on my desk. So there is some sort of boundary in place, so that's good news. I can see a poster that I have up on my desk that says just one more chapter, which is kind of encouraging. A couple of copies of my new book, Tiny Daggers, which is out in a few weeks' time. They're there for me to have a reread to kind of refresh myself on what I wrote because it was a while ago. And then there are various notebooks with various random things scribbled in them for the book after that and the book after that.
So just very quickly on the book after that and the book after that, is that through force that you have to think that far in advance? Is that just something you naturally do? You're always planning for the future, having different ideas that you'd like to build on?
A bit of both. I'm in contract for 2 books after Tiny Daggers, so I'm editing the one after that, which is called The Alphabet Women, and then I'm writing the one after that. So part of it is just how the schedule works, and I think it's the case for most writers, really. Unless you're writing out of contract or it's a debut, you are normally quite far ahead of where readers are. But it also, I think it's part of my brain, probably most writers' brains, that you are always thinking of ideas anyway.
You're 6 years into your career being published now. Is there anything that prepares you for that side of things, that you have to plan so far in advance and that you have to be thinking 3 books down the line?
No, I don't think there is. And it's something that I always say to people who are working on debuts, actually, and trying to get a book deal, that I think having the second book certainly ready to go when the book is out on submission is a really good idea, because otherwise I think people can kind of panic into the books after that, because suddenly you go from no deadline, all the time in the world, you're tinkering, you're working on this book, you've had it in your head for years, to an editor who's going, right, I need this book on, November the 2nd, and I need the next one this date. And that's quite a big shock, I think, if you've been, tinkering with this debut for years, often decades for some people. So I think it's a really good thing to know if you're starting out, that the more you've got in the tank and the more ideas that you've got, at least percolating, they don't have to be far down the line, but at least kind of start thinking.
So just popping you back in your writing room. So there's the inspiration around you. Just one more chapter. I guess a few toys where the kids have been there. That must be quite inspirational, I guess, a little bit. What's there that's a bit more practical? Is there any kind of planning detritus all around you?
Yeah, so that I am very much a laptop planner. So I use software called Scrivener. I know some people have literally the Post-its on the wall. Scrivener is kind of an online version of that, I suppose, as in that you can drag and drop your chapters, you can move things around. It's quite visual. So I have all of that on my laptop, and like I said, I do have the notebooks. There's about 5 on my desk at the moment at a count, and they do all have this kind of hodgepodge of notes in. Yeah, but most of it is done in Scrivener, which I find really useful. It's always one of my first recommendations to any writers.
How visual do things need to be to inspire you and to keep you on track? Do you kind of need a lot of, even though it's all on Scrivener on the screen, do you need kind of bright colours and things just to jog your memory?
Yeah, like I often, I will kind of get a face, of a character of someone. This is really niche, but one book I was writing, I was watching, like many people, The Traitors, and I need the characters to have a face. I think some people are better than others at inventing face, or being sort of trying to create their own visuals, and I very much need something to hang a visual on. So I usually set books in places that I know well, because I find the description is a lot more rich that way. But I did actually that for that book, basically in my head, most of the main characters had the faces of cast members of The Traitors because they were faces that I was seeing every night. So in Scrivener, I will have character profiles where I will have images of what the characters look like. And obviously readers will create their own image of characters, but it's useful for me to know what they look like to me so that description is real. And it's also often at the point where I will decamp from my desk at home and go and sit in a cafe when I kind of need to remember what human beings look like in the real world, and what they do with their faces and what they do with their bodies. And that then I find really, really useful to just be around a hodgepodge of people in a cafe.
If you are, watching The Traitors more or less every night, and that's what's reminding you of what your characters look like, but is there the other side of that coin, in that because you're seeing these characters that they're in real life so often, their personalities on the telly kind of seep through into what you're writing a bit inadvertently.
There's definitely germs of that. Like I noticed that there was one of the characters that I ended up giving a hobby. It wasn't like a main part of the plot, but I sort of needed him to have a hobby. And because I'd then been on this traitor character's Instagram and seen pictures of him doing a certain hobby, it then felt very natural to give him that hobby. And like I say, it wasn't a main plot point. And you wouldn't have even connected the dots. But for me, that visual then kind of went a step further and became that. So I think characters for me are always very much this kind of conglomerate of, a mannerism of one person, a characteristic of another, a fashion sense of somebody. And so it's just kind of this collating them for me. And I think that stuff just helps.
Isn't it absolutely wild how much like TV influences that we don't really think of? Like, you imagine these people on the Traitors, they think, it's a big show, I'm going to do primetime BBC telly, but they don't understand how much like they spawn, like they've inspired parts of your book that they may never read.
Wow.
It's absolutely wild. Well, let's get to the routine then, Caroline. So the show is Writer's Routine. Take us through yours. A day in the life of you writing a novel. How does the whole thing look?
Yeah, I'm still really giddy about the fact that I actually have some semblance of a routine. Because when I started off writing books, I had very young children. I was kind of on this sort of half maternity leave, half writing. So there was absolutely no routine. It was literally when and where. I mean, I would, if I had 10 minutes, I would take my laptop and be kind of wedged, between the steering wheel and the seat of the car. I grabbed any and every opportunity because I knew that was the only way it was going to happen. Now my children are at school and it's still really, really novelty for me. It's a fairly short day compared to most people because I do sort of pack up at 3:00 and then I'll pick up in the evenings. But yeah, now it's a fairly, I was a journalist before I was an author. And I think I know quite a lot of people who were, and I think journalists work in a very much a sort of accepting way that writing is a job. I'm not kind of precious about, I just can't write today. It's not happening. I need to kind of go off and feel creative. And I will sit down and I will bash the words out, and they might be terrible words and they might be deleted afterwards, or there might be a germ in there that I can keep, or it might need a really ruthless edit, but I will sit down and write because that is my writing time. That is my job. I have a deadline and I treat it very much as that. What I would caveat that with saying is that I give myself a weekly word count rather than a daily, so that if there is a day where it doesn't go to plan or it isn't really flowing, it isn't the end of the world, because there will be a good day in there and I'll make the word count up then. But yeah, it's certainly the journalist in me that is, this is a job. There is a deadline. Get the words down.
What is that word count?
It differs depending on what I know my week holds and also how long I've got. It will be somewhere between 5 and 10,000 usually. Yeah, is about ballpark.
So because of that, how much does that ease the pressure then, knowing, because we all have it, sometimes you can feel it quite early on in a day when you just think, I'm not really up to this today. And you may be a bit more accepting than most, as you've mentioned, because of being a journalist, and you learn to just get the words down. But if it's really not kind of happening, how helpful is it to know that, well, it's fine, I could work twice as hard tomorrow? But then again, that's a bit daunting at times, I'd imagine.
I find it really helpful. Yeah, like I say, I think I used to do it with the daily one, and then you do start getting that kind of impending sense of not just doom but failure. I think you've set yourself a task and you haven't achieved it, and that's not a nice feeling for anyone. So I think it gives me a pass. I think it gives me, I'm not very good at leaving my desk and knowing when to walk away, when to just go for a run, go for a walk. clear my head. But whenever I do that, I realize what a good idea it is sometimes. And sometimes that just changing the picture and changing the headspace is what you need to do. And so I think it allows for that. It's another one of my kind of first go-to pieces of advice for any new writers, because I do think there will be the good days, and there will also be the, our attention spans in 2025. I mean, I sat down to write this morning and I spent an hour on Instagram doing work. It's work stuff. I did an event last night. I was posting about it. I'm on Amazon First Reads this weekend, has gone live. So there was loads of stuff I needed to post about and fuel, but it still swallowed up a chunk of the day. And you then have that gnawing, oh, I'm behind. So I think giving yourself that space to go, it's okay, and you don't have to have the feeling of failure while still staying on track, which it is important to do. It really works for me, the weekly word count.
On the flip side of it, if you've had a very, very good day, say your word count for the week is, 5,000. Say on a Monday, you are just feeling full of it and you manage to bash out 2,500. What are you doing for the next few days? Are you taking it slightly easy, or are you grabbing the ball and running with it and just going with the momentum?
Yeah, the second one. I feel like it does happen sometimes, and it's like giving future you a little gift, isn't it? It's like right, I've helped you out, and then I just try to get ahead, because there will always be. It's not like the writing stops and I send it to my editor. There will always be redrafting and editing time, and the more of that, the better. I don't think I can ever have enough of that time. I think it will always benefit from it. So if I get so ahead that I buy myself, a week or two that I didn't expect to have, that will always be useful for tightening, for editing, for redrafting, and getting the book into better shape before it's sent. So yeah, it's a little gift for future me.
I know that you've said because of the journalism, you have to be good, or at least willing to sit down and write the words, even if you don't feel like they're coming. But how are you at charting your energy through the day? So I don't know how long kids are at school or nursery for. Is it 4 hours? I'm not really sure anyway.
No, about 6, yeah.
Is it 6?
Yeah.
Fair play. So you've got 6 hours to play with, more or less. How do you find that time ebbing and flowing? Are you pretty consistent at just tapping away furiously the whole time? What does it work like?
Yeah, I am pretty consistent. Like I say, I struggle, I think, like most people do, with that kind of flitty brain of 2025. I sometimes I'll do Pomodoro technique to sort of just keep my head down writing, and then give myself the enforced break at the end, rather than going, oh, I've started writing some words, oh, I need to post about that event, I need to do that, oh, now I need to just write that email. So some days are better than others. It's a really brilliant feeling when you just get so lost in the writing and you don't look up, and the flow is going. But it certainly doesn't happen every day. Certainly not to me anyway. I also really love picking up in the evenings, actually, because I will do the 6 hours during the day, and then often I will do a bit in the evenings, a couple of hours, and I find that a really different headspace. I think because not that no one ever sends an email in the evening, and not there aren't distractions, but it certainly feels like a different mode, because I think because you're kind of not officially in work mode, and I'll generally work in a different place. It's a bit more casual. I work on the sofa. Sometimes there's a glass of wine, and it just sort of feels different somehow, and I quite like doing that and sort of mixing it up sometimes, and sometimes that is really where the words will get going as well. I mean, we all learnt lessons during COVID, didn't we? And my key takeaway was that I cannot parent and work at the same time. It makes me bad at both. It makes me feel very frustrated with myself. It just doesn't work. I think it's the same for most people. I certainly can't write when my children are around. Nobody wins, and nobody gets the best version of me. So it's very much after bedtime. It's that kind of evening quiet mode where the extra writing comes in, rather than definitely not when they're around.
Well, you say learning lessons from the pandemic. As I say, 6 years now into being a published author, 5 books down. What have you learned about how you write, what's best for you, and how has that tweaked over time?
Oh God, you learn so much constantly, don't you? And I don't think I realised that at all. I think I really thought, especially because I've always been a writer, that's always been my job. So I just kind of thought it was a different format, and I'd done a lot of different formats. I'd done copywriting, and I'd written features, and I'd written news, and I've written online and blogs and live blogs. And so I just thought, oh, this will just be a different format. It was a format I was really excited about, and I really wanted to do it. But I didn't realise that it was starting an entirely different profession, and I didn't realise how little I knew. And I do kind of look back now and go, do you know what? I've learned like a lot of stuff, and it's very much learning on the job. I've never done any courses. It's just what you learn as you go. I read my dialogue now. Actually, that's a big thing, and I think, oh, I've got so much better at dialogue and at hearing how people's speech patterns are, rather than kind of transcribing it as though it's the written word. So I think that's been a really, really big one for me. There's all the things you learn about yourself in terms of how you work and how I work in a routine way, and what works for me. Like I used to feel hugely, hugely guilty and kind of quite embarrassed that I couldn't. Before I wrote a book, I would sit down with these printed from online character profiles. I'd be right now I will write my character profile. And I didn't know why I couldn't do it. They just, I was like blonde hair, blue eyes. And I'd just be like, God, these are rubbish. Why can't I do this? And then I realized that the characters would evolve as I wrote the book. And then I would return to the character profile and kind of fill them in based on what the characters had started to do and how they had sort of started to become alive as I wrote. But I never used to tell anyone that, because I thought, oh no, that's not the way round. You're supposed to do it. And then I went to see Liane Moriarty speak, actually. And I do quite a lot of events with authors. I chair a lot of events and I interview a lot of authors as well. And slowly I started to notice that, first of all, some people do that, but also some people do even weirder stuff or different stuff. And there actually is no rule book. And I think I started to give myself a bit of a break and allow for me and how I work and how it works best for me, and kind of accept that that's okay.
Taking you back to working as a journalist, so being surrounded by words, and I guess then writing a novel is a bit like a busman's holiday at times. But so what was it that finally prompted you to write the novel? Because I would imagine it's something that you'd probably wanted to do for a little while. It's just finding time in amongst writing for magazines and stuff. What was the tipping point that you thought, oh, okay, let's go?
Well, there were a couple of things. So firstly, you're absolutely right. Like a lot of writers, I'd always wanted to write a book. I'm a huge reader, always have been. And it was a massive ambition of mine. So one was practical. I went freelance. I left quite a big job at a national newspaper. And I had a bit more time. I said what I certainly had was a bit more flex on my time, I guess. And that time, a lot of that was spent in my flat in London, where I was for a lot of hours. That's where I work from. And I could hear someone who also worked from home, did a very different job from me, through the wall. And what that led to was the idea for my first novel, which was entitled Through the Wall. So yeah, you can kind of see that process. So I think suddenly what I had was the time and an idea that I really believed had some legs, and had enough to it that because I'd tried before. I had sort of 20,000 words of a YA book that I'd been working on, and it just didn't have the legs to kind of take it all the way. And I suddenly felt like, do you know what? I think this one does. So I think they were the two crucial things. And then so I started working on it, and a friend, I got pregnant, and a friend a friend who works in the publishing industry said to me, get that book written before that baby comes or you'll never have time. And if there's anything journalists love, it's a deadline. So I was like, right, let's go. So that was probably the combination of factors, I think.
And you've slightly touched on this, and obviously that prompt of advice from a mate. Because you had worked as a journalist, so you've been surrounded by writing words for so long, was the leap to doing it for yourself as a novel and writing more prose, was that as straightforward as perhaps some might imagine?
No, it wasn't. I think I always remember someone I knew years ago trying to learn Spanish and Italian at the same time, and so trying to do two things that are very similar to each other is actually a very, very difficult thing, because there's so much crossover, but they are. And so at the same time I was writing the book, I was still making a living from writing features. And I remember having this kind of this epiphany that features are about 2,000 words is probably kind of ballpark. And so every time I sat down to look over that feature that I was working on, I could read that in its entirety. I could see it. We talk about visuals. I could see it all in front of me. I could see the start, I could see the middle, I could see the end, I could see the whole arc. I started working on Through the Wall, and it was on a Word document. This was before I discovered Scrivener. And so every time I went back to it, I'd kind of start from the beginning, like I did with a feature, which meant the beginning was spot on. The beginning had so much attention given to it. But then I realized that, I'd sit down for, a couple of hours, an hour here, an hour, and I could never, ever get to the ends, especially as this thing got bigger and more sprawling. And that's when that kind of dawned on me that this had to be a very different process, really, because writing something at 2,000 words and 80,000 words is so, so different. And I do think that's one of the things that Scrivener has really helped me with, because it breaks it up and it makes it feel very manageable, and like you then can dip in to something and read, a chapter in its entirety, and it gives it this really helpful visual for me. There were loads of other lessons like that as well, in terms of researching and how long researching takes, and returning to researching with a book in the way that, with a feature or research I'd write, and that was that. But the kind of back and forth process of prep, research, writing, returning to the research, bit more prep, bit more writing, editing, bit more research, bit of writing, editing, the kind of the longevity of it and the process was so very different, really. And I think that took me a while to get my head around, because like I say, I think I had thought, I'm a writer, I've written in all these different formats. Like, sure, it's going to be bigger, it's going to take longer, but I kind of know what I'm doing. And I think one other thing I would say is realizing how much a lifetime of being a reader came into it, and thinking like a reader. I don't think I quite realized how important that was at the start as well. And I think now I definitely will be quite ruthless in terms of reading my writing. Would I love this as a reader? Would I switch off? Would I get bored? Is this pacey enough? Is this giving me what I would want as a reader as well?
We'll be back with more from Caroline in just a sec. If you're enjoying the show and you'd like to help us out, well, you can do that in a few ways. You can support us on Patreon. That way you get access to a little writing community that we've got there. You get merged, there is bonus content, and there is even a way for your book to sponsor the show. So if you've written something, if it deserves more talk, if it needs more eyes and more ears, in this case, on it, let me do the plug-in for you. I'd love to do that. You can do that by becoming a monthly rolling backer over at Patreon for as little or as much as you'd like, and for as long or as short as you like. So that's over on Patreon. it might be better for you to just make a one-off contribution to the show. You can do that on our Ko-Fi page. It's one and done. Whatever you send over goes an extraordinarily long way to helping me find the time to make you these shows. You can do that over on our Ko-Fi page, ko-fi.com/writers routine. However you can support us goes such a long way, and I'm always very thankful for whatever you can do. And you can find links for both of those in the episode notes or wherever you're listening. Let's get back to it then, with Caroline Corcoran on the show, chatting through her new novel, Tiny Daggers. It's all about the expat, Holly, living it up and loving life in Miami when she runs into a ghost from her life in London, an old friend, another Holly, who reminds her of memories that she spent decades trying to bury. In this half, we talk about the genre, how she embraces the business of that and the tropes involved with writing it. And we pick it up with a bit more about Caroline's work as a journalist, how it influenced the way she writes, and particularly structures a story.
There are so many crossovers as well as the differences in terms of, a gut instinct for a narrative arc. I would like to think I have, whether that narrative arc it spans for 2,000 words or 80,000 words. I think in terms of chapters, I never want to see them as too separate, because I always want that, that flow through. So I don't know if I quite got it from that, but certainly in terms of that gut, that sort of instinctive feeling for what you need at what point, and even as when you get down to the kind of minutiae of sentence structure, and when you need a short sentence, when you need something punchy, when there's a bit more room to breathe with some longer sentences. And a lot of those kind of the basics of writing, I think, certainly translated over, and that instinct for a narrative.
So 5 books down now. And having worked as a journalist, you said about almost perfecting the very beginning. How clean are your first drafts a few books into it now?
Oh God, no, not clean at all. No, I we talk about the first draft a lot, don't we? And I do believe it kind of has to be messy, I think. I think that's just part of the process. And I think what you do is you get to the point where it's as good as you can make it right now. And then it needs somebody else. I have a brilliant agent. I have a brilliant editor. And it needs somebody who you trust, who loves books, who knows your writing, to look at it and go, right, here are my fresh eyes. Here are my thoughts. And then it's like this new stage opens up, and you look at it and you go, yes, of course. Of course that's what it needs. But at that point, you can't, you're just too close to it. And I think that's all you can really hope for from a first draft, that it's good enough that there is something in there that somebody very talented and knowledgeable can work with, and it can be taken on from there. And once it comes back to you, this world then has opened up of the second draft and the third draft, and however many drafts there are going to be. But yeah, it's certainly never clean. That is for sure.
So the new novel is Tiny Daggers, Caroline. Just tell us about the first moment that the idea for this story came into your head. How did it present itself?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, Tiny Daggers, actually, because I went to Miami in 2016. I had been once before, but 2016 was the time when I kind of I looked around and I thought, oh, this is a good setting, and I'm very big on imagery, and it's never the kind of the headline stuff of a book. It's never, what you're kind of shouting about and the twists and the plots. But I do really love that kind of planting those images and those visuals. And I got very fixated on the humidity of Miami, and then this motif of the mosquito that runs through. And I just thought it was a brilliant setting. I'm a big fan of settings and good settings, and and settings that really kind of weave into the plot, and become part of it. And I really felt like Miami could do that. And practically, I was very lucky because I was out in Miami visiting a friend who was living out there. So I kind of, had my mental and physical notes that I mulled over. But by the time I came to write Tiny Daggers, it was quite a long time afterwards. So she was very helpful in answering my questions and filling in the gaps that I couldn't remember or I didn't know.
So mainly what's inspiring you when you're out there is the place, the vibe, the weather, the animals. Um, uh, at what point are you getting like the main drive of a psychological thriller plot to run through it? So with the two Hollies, is it something that you're kind of sat with and you're thinking, I really want a thing here. What can I do there? Or is it a bit more organic?
I think it's a bit more organic. I always find it very difficult to sort of trace back to the origins of ideas because, like I say, there are 5 notebooks on my desk at the moment, and they've all got these random thoughts, as has the notes app on my phone, where I'll just be somewhere and I'll be like, "Oh, that's interesting." I often find, a dynamic between 2 women is a real recurring theme in my books, and this kind of push pull between women is a real. Is a really kind of recurring motif in my books. And I think this expat community that I wanted to explore in this book then needed a foil to it with somebody entering it who wasn't already in it, that gave this dynamic a little bit of kind of something from the past, something that wasn't too insular, something that came from outside and kind of infiltrated it and changed it up. I also often quite like to have 2 settings in the book. So I felt like if I brought someone in from elsewhere, I could also, we go to the Lake District, to Cumbria. That's a kind of another place that I know well. And I kind of wanted to have some fun with that description as well. So it kind of allows for that as well. But yeah, I think it is very organic. And often I do sort of, there was stuff in the metaphor that I kind of pulled out of the mosquitoes and this kind of deadly, it doesn't look particularly harmless, but actually, could be extremely deadly. Only female mosquitoes bite. That was another thing that was kind of in the forefront of my mind. So often it is something like that, or something you can draw out of the imagery that then gives you an idea for character, for plot, for how the thriller is going to take shape.
And how long will you normally be sitting on that before you start typing away? What do you need to know to build up some framework for your post-it notes on Scrivener?
It can be so varied, because I think, like I say, that was 2016 that the germ was in. So I wrote a few more books in between that and Tiny Daggers. So there's a lot of sort of percolating time, I think. And that's not kind of, actively planning and actively plotting. Ideally, the actual planning and plotting time, I like to have. I'm not very good at planning. I'm not very good at planning, and I'm not very good at being patient in terms of. I like to get going on the writing. I like to get cracking. I get a bit too. I get a little bit impatient with the planning, and like I say, I often kind of then have to go back and plan a bit more and re-enter it. But in terms of how long, it can just be so varied, and it just depends on the book. There's such different beasts, I find. Like, some just really begin to write themselves. Some need a lot of time to be percolating. It's probably about 5 or 6 months writing time, and a couple of months planning, sort of in a full-on way, but with a lot of time where it's ticking away in the background.
Well, ideally, or maybe averagely, before you do start typing, what is it you would like to know about the entire 80,000 word beast?
So when I wrote the YA book that I didn't get published and that I didn't finish, I realised and again, it's all these things we learn along the way. I realized that I need a plan, and it doesn't matter if that plan, if I deviate massively from the plan, which I often do. And someone once referred to writing with an analogy of a runner. It's like you might set out with a plan of where you're going to go, but you kind of see something interesting up a street and you decide to take that route instead. And you should absolutely do that with writing. You'll lead yourself to tangents. Your characters will lead you. But I do need an initial plan. And there's various different things out there, but I use the Save the Cat beat sheet, which just kind of roughly sort of paces out the book for me. And it just means, that kind of, often with writing, you'll come out of you'll kind of come out of the blocks, all guns blazing. You've got this new idea. It's great. The first 20,000 words are kind of easy, really. You're setting out your story, you're pretty excited about it. And it's that middle, it's same with the ending. The ending's very exciting, and you're leading up to your denouement, and you know where this is going to go. But that middle part can be really tricky. What do these characters do, and how can I keep this pace? So I think for me, what having the beat sheet and the plan does is it keeps me moving during those more difficult word count weeks, and it gives me some focus, even if, like I say, it will deviate hugely. And often the best twists in my books are not in the plan at the beginning. They're almost always the ones that come as I write.
You've spoken about your characters and how you can lose your way with them, where you did, because you kept coming back to their kind of bios and realizing, hang on, this isn't what they were meant to be doing. How have you learned to deal with a character doing its own thing and maybe taking you wildly away from where you anticipated?
I don't think it's that they're not doing what they're meant to be. I think it's that they are kind of becoming through the book, I think. And I have heard other people talk about how they kind of start off as cardboard cutouts. And I think that's what I didn't realize when I was trying to write these character profiles, that it's pretty impossible to sit and look at a Word document and write a fully formed character in a character profile. It's like kind of expecting a human being to exist without functioning with other people and the world. And they'll be very simplistic. They would be, without dialogue, without interaction. It would be a really, really simplistic existence. And I think once you put your character into the plot of your book and you put them with other characters and you hear them speaking in the dialogue, you write for them, and you, they'll adopt a turn of phrase. They will, I think it's Fleischman is in Trouble, where the character has ketchup on the side, or every sauce on the side. And these just kind of little character traits that stay with you afterwards, and they kind of they make the characters real. And I think then what I then do is revisit that character profile and put those things in, so that then they are I make sure that they are then through the whole book, and that I remember them, and that there's consistency. And often then they will kind of lead me to something in the plot as well, that a trait of a character will then become linked to actually something that happens in the plot. But yeah, I think you kind of have to let them evolve, and characters have evolved very far and away from where I thought they might be in books that I've written. And that's great. It's interesting. It keeps it interesting. And it often then means it opens up something in your plot, especially in this genre, which is really interesting and great to explore as well.
I know that authors don't really like to, or some authors don't like to discuss genre, right? Which I completely understand. Across all the bump and the blurbs around you, it's quite clear that you're writing thrillers, and quite a lot of them psychological thrillers, which is fantastic. So how thoroughly do you think about what needs to be in a psychological thriller when you are mapping out what you think a book might be? Are you quite actively saying, well, it will need this moment here, it will need this kind of twist. It needs these characters to present in this sort of way.
No, I'm not actually. I think the only thing, because I see other writers talk about, and people are different. Everyone has their way, don't they? But I see people saying, these are the kind of 10 tropes, or these are the things that you kind of need to do. And that has just never been something that I've done. I think what I try to do, and what I try to trust my judgment on, is that, like I say, I am a huge reader, and what I try to do is write like a reader and write for what I would want as a reader. And I think the only thing that I am very, very conscious of, that is a very kind of psychological thriller thing, is never letting that pace slip, never letting up on the pace, because I think that is kind of 101 of the genre, and I think it's that's got to keep moving. But beyond that, I have no issue with talking about genre. That is very much what the books are. But I do like to think that they're pretty much always books about the female experience. There are some big themes in there, and that's very important to me, that it's not just about twists and turns, that it is about something, and that it's saying something. And I'm always very pleased when interviewers or see those things and pull them out, because that's what elevates, for me as a reader, that is what elevates a psychological thriller to the next level. I interviewed Gillian McAllister not long ago, and I said to her, to me, yeah, this is a thriller. It's a great thriller, but it's also a brilliant love story. And I think that, for me, is what is a standout psychological thriller, when it is also just a beautiful, brilliant story as well.
That is it with Caroline Corcoran on the show. The brand new novel is Tiny Daggers. If you'd like to get a copy, please do use the link in the episode notes. It will take you through to our bookshop.org page. And as it gets into Christmas, if you're buying books as presents, just search on that link, because some of it will go towards the author, this podcast, and your local independent bookshop, which I think is win-win-win, really. Now, you can support the show on Patreon and Ko-Fi. Again, links wherever you're listening, and you can get in touch, send a message to the show, use the contact page at writersroutine.com. We're on all the socials as well, at WritersPod on most of them. So you do that, and I will see you next week with a brand new episode of the podcast. Until then, thank you for listening.